So the anti-corruption agency now has 4 days left to execute a warrant to detain President Yoon Suk Yeol over his martial law order, with the execution not looking easy. Let's discuss more with Professor Lee Hee-eun this morning. Welcome back and Happy New Year, Professor Lee.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you.
So the investigation team pledged to carry out the arrest warrant by January 6th. Does that mean the arrest will happen sometime between now and next Monday, no matter what?
Well, you certainly would expect to, because the CIO chief has indicated that he will pursue the arrest. And despite the potential issues, the legal issues that exist there, but also the potential for clashes with Yoon supporters, as well as the Presidential Security Service. So there's a window of time here, January 6th, where the arrest warrant will expire. And because he's publicly indicated they will go forward with the arrest, there will at least be an attempt to arrest the president in this case. And so I think you should fully expect there should be some situation at the presidential residence to seek the arrest of the president under this arrest warrant.
So it looks like attempts to arrest President Yoon will be inevitable. Now, how successful have attempts to arrest a politician been in the past?
Well, there were two very notable cases in the past, in 2000 and 2004, where two politicians in each separate situations were attempted to be arrested. And actually, in both cases, they were failed to be arrested by the prosecution for various reasons. One was because this person, in this case, the former Grand National Party member, Jung Hyung-gun, he entered the party office and then basically staged a sit-in protest. And his supporters, as well as other politicians, essentially blocked the police and the prosecution from arresting him. And in another case, in 2004, there was a former Democratic Party leader, Han Hwagap, who was sought to be arrested. But in this case, his party members basically blocked the entrance for the police to enter in to arrest him. So in both cases, because there was a clash between the police and the prosecution versus those who support these politicians, both situations ended up where there was no arrest. So I think this may be the situation that you see going forward with President Yoon, because these two previous cases show that the prosecution was unsuccessful in those situations.
Well, I do have to point out, this is the first time such a warrant has been approved for a sitting South Korean president, which is why it's so hard to predict what will actually happen next. And going back to what you just said, do you think the CIO will use force to arrest Yoon then?
Yeah, you would have to expect that there will be some sort of potential clash because it doesn't seem like, at least in terms of Yoon supporters, the citizens who support President Yoon, but also the X factor here will be the Presidential Security Service, who has not indicated whether or not they will comply with the prosecution with respect to the arrest warrant. So, there's a significant legal issue here because the president's lawyers have argued that basically the Criminal Procedure Act does not give authority for the authorities to actually go and arrest the president, because there are potentially military secrets as well as classified documents which the prosecution and the police have no right to seize. And because they are entering the presidential office, or in this case, his residence, and the existence of these materials could be there, that goes beyond the scope of their search and seizure. And in this case, there's a big legal question here as to whether the judge that basically permitted the warrants to be executed, whether he exceeded his authority in this case. And so there's a legal question here. But in the event, in terms of an actual situation at the presidential residence, I think you should expect to probably see a clash between the parties.
Well, there are, presidential guard and also Yoon supporters outside the residence, which will make it even more hectic, maybe. But do you think CIO will seek maybe support from the police, the backup from the police?
I think you expect to, because they've already been communicating with each other about how they'll execute the warrant. But in the event that it happens over the next few days, of course, January 6th being the deadline, I think the scene there will be extremely chaotic because it's hard to predict, obviously, in terms of the people who are there, the citizens, again, who are in support of President Yoon. But again, the security service it has refused in the past to accept the warrants, and whether or not there's been any agreement that was forged between the security service as well as the prosecution, that remains to be seen. So unless there's any agreement between the two sides as to how they'll conduct the search and ultimately go forward and seize the president, I don't think you should expect to be a calm situation. I think you're going to see a clash. And it'll be very interesting to see the timing of it, whether it happens during the daytime, whether it happens in the evening when no one's around. So I think this is the part of the strategy probably on the prosecution as to the timing of the actual execution of the warrant.
Well, the chief of the CIO sounded pretty determined to make the arrest happen. Let's say Yoon ends up being arrested. Where will he be taken to, and what lies ahead for President Yoon?
Well, he'll be immediately taken to the basic CIO office in Gwacheon, and he'll be subject to questioning. So in this instance, there's been a number of questions, of course, and the public is already aware that the CIO has a large number of questions to ask the president in terms of testimony, getting his testimony as to what happened during the declaration of martial law, and whether or not, in this case, whether he abused his authority. But after that questioning, then he'll be sent to detention. And there's 48 hours between the time he's arrested and the extent to which he can be detained. And he'll be sent to Uiwang, basically, where there's a detention center, and he'll likely be placed in solitary confinement, given his status as the president, not to be mingled with other, let's say, detainees. But then if there's a desire to continue to detain him, then another arrest warrant needs to be issued. And in that case, up to 20 days he can be held. And then there's an issue about whether the prosecution, not the CIO, can also question him, because there's an agreement in advance to question the president on various grounds. So I think what lies ahead is detention. And then the question is whether or not an additional arrest warrant can be sought against him to sustain his detention for 20 days.
Professor Lee, thank you so much for joining us again this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.